There is no planned evacuation drill this evening. Accordingly, if the alarm sounds, it is to be treated as a genuine need to evacuate. There are fire exits to my left and also behind the public gallery this evening. Could I ask if there's anybody who will need assistance should we need to evacuate in an emergency? Okay, and could I also remind you all that it's really important that we muster in the car park and nobody re-enters the building until I've deemed it safe to do so. The meeting has a quasi-judicial role and determines the rights and obligations of the applicant. Members must consider each application and everything that is said in the meeting concerning that application on their planning judgment of the information available to them. Delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice, and planning permission is neither granted nor refused until the issue of that decision notice. Any not a member of the planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak, having given prior notification, and such visiting members may of course include ward members. And whilst visiting members can speak on an application, they are not permitted to vote. Any member acting as a substitute on a planning committee must have undertaken appropriate training before doing so, and members must remain in the meeting for the whole time that each item is being debated and should not vote on the item unless they have done so. I would now like to welcome our public speakers and remind you that you have 3 minutes to speak, and an audible warning of time will be given when there are 30 seconds remaining. Site meeting, you may speak both at this meeting and at the site meeting, but there will be no further opportunity to speak on a matter when it comes back to the planning committee. The meeting will follow the order set out in the agenda. However, I will amend the order if there's good reason for doing so. And in particular, I will take any items where a member of the public has registered to speak first, before moving on to the remainder of the agenda, and I will verbally reorder the agenda as appropriate. We now take item 2, which is apologies for absence and any substitutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor David.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 3, which is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of September 2022, minute numbers 291 to 296 as a correct record. Members, is it your wish? Thank you. Thank you very much. Is to invite members' declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and disclosable non-pecuniary interests under the Code of Conduct adopted by the Council. Councillor Baldock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm the ward member for one of the ward members that was required to consult following previous referral. And although I'm not ecstatic about it, I think that the good compromise and better than was originally on offer, and therefore I decided not to call it back in. I will be speaking as a ward member or not.
I'm just checking online whether remote people can hear us.
Off and on. Off and on.
Intermittent.
Yes, the sound does keep breaking up.
I can hear you well, it's the other people.
For this forceful northern accent, I'm not surprised. Okay, I'll try to get people to speak up. Members, if you could speak up a little more clearly when you ought to speak, and if necessary, I may have to ask you to come forward to deliver what it is that you have to say. Thank you. So now we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is our deferred items. And the first deferred item we have is at St Maur's, the street, Borden, and it's item number 22/501315/4. And I'll thank our officer for an outline and any updates, please.
Can you see my screen, Chair?
Yes, you can see that, William.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, members. So this is a deferred application, deferred from the committee, first of all, in June and the committee in August, to allow further discussions with ward members to determine an improved design. Hello?
Going, William.
Sorry? I can't hear you.
Try to bring up the presentation locally here.
I can hear you now,
Ah, okay.
but it keeps breaking up.
Well, I'll keep
So-
facing the front. I look through the back of my head at your presentation.
Okay, so this is the third item, as I said, to allow discussions on site with the ward members. Those discussions took place, which has resulted in the submission. So the site at St Maur's is within the conservation area, an existing bungalow. Some photographs. The bungalow is to the right hand side of the image with the gable feature coming forward. Further photographs of the front of the site with the cottage, the white rendered cottage in the background. Photograph of the rear of the property, and members will note the existing dormer window to the rear of the property. Photographs of the adjoining property to the right hand side, sorry, to the left hand side as you look at the property. You can see the dormer window to St Maur's on the left hand side of the image. These are the existing elevations of the bungalow. With you see my cursor, the front and two sides, and the rear elevation with the dormer window. This is the existing floor plans showing kitchen, bathroom, living room, hall, bedroom at ground floor, and 2 bedrooms at first floor level. These are the proposed amended plans, which were as a result of the discussions on site. Essentially, the designs involved the narrowing of the front gable feature with a horizontal mullion added to the center part of that feature window, and mention was also made of a existing Saint gargoyle which was found to the front of the property, which is to be retained and repositioned within the side chimney stack. And this is a plan showing additional tree planting to the front of the sides. Proposed floor plans showing a combination at ground floor level and, as currently, three bedrooms. This time all the bedrooms are at first floor level. The application is therefore before you, Chair, with a recommendation for approval, subject to conditions as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just for those in attendance at the meeting, if you see me looking in the opposite directions, because I'm looking at the screen rather than craning my neck for the rest of the evening. Thank you all very much. So I move the OSSA recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, councillor Jays. Councillor Bollock, you wanted to speak as a ward member on this one.
Yeah, thank you. You recall that it was deferred to have discussions with the ward members. There was a site meeting. I haven't heard from the other ward members. I don't know. We elevation of the I still don't think it's great. I think I probably would accept it.
Bollock? Just to take a seat at the top for a second. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, members, so anybody wish to speak on this one? Councillor Winkler?
Thank you, Chair.
Speak up a little, Councillor Winkler, please. Thank you. Councillor Henderson, please.
Yeah, I have no problem.
I agree, and my understanding is that there was an oversight on that part, and we are to determine the application this evening. So we can get back into real time, but thank you for those observations. So I'll just get the message across saying that we're getting comments from people remotely that still can't hear anything. So unfortunately, it's the technology. Okay, so those in favour of the OSSA recommendation for approval? Those against? And abstentions. Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. So permission granted subject to the conditions and the issuing of the decision notice. Welcome back, Councillor Bolger. We now move on to deferred item 2 on this evening's agenda. And this one is St Saviour's Church, Wistful Road, Faversham. And I'll thank the officer for an outline and any updates on this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? I'm really struggling to pick up what members are saying.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, William. If that helps.
Right. Thank you, Chair. As I said, this is the deferred application deferred from the Planning Committee on the 13th of January this year to allow further sound recordings and information being presented with regards to the noise impacts of the use of the site on adjoining residential properties. So this is the building which sits on the junction there at Whitstable Road. Distinctive tin building, those that you know it, which is currently being used as a cafe and community uses. A couple of photographs of the internals of the former chapel building. This is the existing layout of the building. So the resolution. Can you hear me still?
Yes, yes.
I just keep getting some pingings coming in my ears. Was subject to further consultation with environmental health officer, who is in attendance in person at committee, and was discussed and is now subject to the approval of the retention of the use of the building, subject to conditions as set out within the recommendation element to the application before you, Chair. Thank you. In terms of updates, we have had a couple of further letters of support from Faversham residents. They didn't raise any substantive new issues, but we've also had a letter from the applicant, which has been forwarded to all members, which is quite a lengthy piece of correspondence, but that has been forwarded to members this afternoon for their attention. Thank you. The application, therefore, Chair, is with you with a recommendation for approval, subject to those conditions as set out. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now, Parish Councillor, Town Councillor Chris Williams, please, to speak on this item. Okay, I'll get our Democratic Service Officer to read out Councillor Williams's.
Due to the complexity and technicality of the application, Faversham Town Council wishes to comment but not make a recommendation. Members support the applicant's ambitions for their business, which when operating during the day and early evening was considered an asset to the town. It considered that issues have arisen since the venue started to operate as a music venue, opening later. The building is not sound insulated and is in a residential area. It was considered that a limit on noise should be set. Whilst the Town Council felt that the present level of 37 decibels was not appropriate for the venue, it did not wish to comment on what an appropriate level would be. Members suggest that Swale Borough Council seek expert advice and liaise with residents in neighbouring properties before setting a reasonable level. Consideration should be given to what is appropriate for this type of venue, in this type of structure, in this location. Members considered that having music till 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday would be appropriate on condition that the set sound level is enforced. The Town Council asks to be consulted on licence application for this venue. As a ward member, my personal opinion is I would like to see this committee consider comments from neighbours which relate to volume levels and the impact on their health. A compromise needs to be made which would allow the business to operate and neighbouring residents a respectful noise level. 91 and 85 decibel of recent recording is too loud and clearly can't be acceptable. As mentioned before, the Town Centre Planning Committee also agree that 37 decibels is too low for the viability of the business. A compromised noise level restricted at 60 decibels, in my opinion, seems reasonable. I urge the committee to consider all the points of view here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Karen Christopher, please, to speak on this item. I can't, thank you.
The Hot Tin was a place for cultural exchange and a sense of community, a welcoming place, providing the solace of community gathering. A rustic building richly steeped in history, a venue for people to come together to hear music and spoken word and to share ideas about arts and crafts and gardening and innovation in business and design. The spice of life. And sometimes a gentle crowd makes a joyous noise. In the 3 years before Swale Borough Council imposed its current operating restrictions, the applicants quickly established the Hot Tin as an exciting new combination of music venue, cinema, art gallery, and cafe. A valuable community hub where local artisans could promote their products and people of the town could meet for a drink or a delicious light lunch, or spend an evening in the invariably quiet, friendly atmosphere of the bar. The sound was never very loud, just a comfortable level appropriate to the small size of the venue. Its unique combination of cultural offerings was an asset to the whole community, and Faversham was very lucky to have it. During the pandemic, the applicants worked to improve the facilities while barely covering their overheads, funded only by arts and venue support organizations which recognize the value of their work. From the start, the applicants made it clear in their original planning application that the mainstay of their business at the Hot Tin would be the events, film shows, and live music. The many social benefits they have provided are not financially viable without a cross-subsidy from the events revenue. Since the last hearing of their renewed planning application, new restrictions have forced the applicants to reschedule and sometimes cancel performances and compromise the other functions of the venue. The Hot Tin have weathered the last couple of years brilliantly and are ready to re-establish their place as an important part of the town's social fabric. Instead, the Hot Tin has been largely closed since the restrictions were imposed, and there is a good chance that Faversham will lose this wonderful, unique asset if they are maintained. No venue can survive financially under such conditions. I urge the members to lift these restrictions and restore viability to the Hot Tin. This is a unique, comfortable, and friendly setting for many people. Their wide-ranging and diverse program of activities offers something for everyone, including mixed stages and mixed interests. This venue makes a small noise on a busy road in which heavy goods vehicles trundle and rumble back and forth in and out of a town in which they are the sole purveyors of the kind of warm, generous atmosphere they provide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Collins, please, to speak on this item.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, Mr. Collins, thank you.
Splendid. We have lived here for 35 years
and in 2018, the Hot Tin was granted a 3-year temporary planning consent for a cafe and arts centre on the basis that there would be 1 or 2 music events a month of a classical or acoustic nature. We have always supported its daytime use and those evening events which do not feature loud music. However, before long, there were weekly DJ nights and frequent Saturday night events of amplified music. The permanent closure of the cafe was announced on their social media in June, and the business is now solely advertised as a venue for events and private hire. Amplified music events have blighted our lives. We live in a Victorian house 26 feet away. Every room has a principal wall opposite the tin church, so music at any volume is clearly heard in all parts of our house. That noise intrudes on our home and has a huge impact on our quality of life and imposes significant psychological strain. On those evenings, we have not had the enjoyment of our own home. There is now clear evidence to prove that the Hot Tin is unsuitable for amplified music. It is a sheet metal building and, as noted in the Environmental Health Report, shakes and vibrates with, and I quote, highly disturbing and penetrating noise levels. This unacceptable noise of 17th of July extended to 113 metres, affecting a large residential area. As well as being very loud, the finishing time condition was breached. Both facts were observed by the planning officer and reported. Following the last planning committee meeting, the Hot Tin moved its potentially louder music events to the parish church, a major stone-built building. It is suggested that the Hot Tin be treated like a village hall. A village hall is run not for profit by a local committee immediately answerable to local residents, whereas the new business model is based on the sale of tickets for events and the accompanying sale of alcohol for profit. It is not in any way similar, being a private business with a specific audience. I ask that the planning committee do not allow amplified music at the Hot Tin without a noise limiter. A limiter is the only indisputable measure that is not open to interpretation. The fundamental fact is the Hot Tin is totally unsuitable for amplified music, as it is in an unsuitable building in an unsuitable residential area. Amplified music events have been clearly identified as a source of local noise pollution. If left to operate without effective restraints, I fear the degree of noise nuisance will escalate. Your decision is hugely important to this neighbourhood now and for the future, as your decision will go into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Romana Bellinger, please, to speak on this item.
Excellent Grade 2 listed Iron Church. This is our home and we are dedicated to raising funds for its full restoration. We were granted a 3-year temporary licence in order to prove ourselves, and we have proved ourselves. Swale Borough Council have confirmed that they have not received any complaints regarding our venue or noise nuisance or noise complaints of any sort. On reapplication for permanent change of use, committee members chose to restrict us to a 10 p.m. finish for music, with Condition 8 not being voted for at the hearing in October 2021. The Planning Department chose to apply Condition 8 against the voting members' determination. This application is to remove Condition 8. James Freeman assured us in writing that he would make every effort to remove the condition if we were to not go through the appeals process, and this would be done in a matter of weeks. The result of the hearing in January 2022 was non-determination. Noise readings taken on 17th July was in the middle of a heat wave of 33 plus temperatures, and we had to have our doors and vents open. The EH team say they chose to measure this event because it was the worst case scenario and impact of 1 Whitstable Road, with the occupants having to admit, in quotes, that the sound was of a lower level. Their external monitoring does not take into account the busy traffic on the Whitstable Road and Cypress Road. Car traffic includes low frequency, and the report assumes that the troublesome low frequency readings only come from our venue. We've had professional noise reports taken, which concludes very little impact on our surrounding neighbours. This is reflected in the 100+ letters of support sent to the Planning Authority. 6 of these letters of support come from our very close neighbours. We also work with residents immediately behind us at Sanctuary House, who are technically our closest neighbours. Recommended by the Planning Authority is even more restricting. We are not a village hall with charity status. We are a privately owned business that need to programme our event without being hampered by having to apply for approval for every event we have. No other venue has to do this. The restrictions are unfair. The Faversham Fair, held immediately across from us, has had very loud open-air music and evenings so far this year, and this is in the open air. We are struggling with COVID-related debts and now face the current economic downturn, energy crisis and rising costs. We have been extremely stressed over these applications, and our mental health has suffered greatly. Section 8 and not replace it with more restrictions on our business, as this will bankrupt us.
3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Jays. I've got Councillor Baldock.
Various bits of it, running.
Yes.
So this is about the noise. On page 50, conclusion 9.1, it says, whilst there's some evidence arising since the October meeting, noise from members imposed such safeguards as they saw fit. Don't move near a pub. If you don't like church bells ringing and don't move near a church. In this case, I don't think this really church that people could expect. Does give me concern. That's been that there are a whole range of other events. They are allowed to play music, but it's not too. But it just seems to come down to how loud they play the music. And if it's and whilst I appreciate the and it was an error, I feel uncomfortable removing.
Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks.
Could I ask you to come forward? Still get messages through, not. picking up what members are saying. I do apologise. They'll be fit by then, the evening between us all. I'm the only one who's have to do this. That's all.
I mean, here, same here.
Thanks for that.
I've got no problem with it. I think we have left this since January. We discussed it, I think there was a number of times when we had the last application and we looked at these committees. I think we had a deferral and it came back, and we've had this in January. It's now gone on. Environmental health have got no problems with it. They have suggested that condition to deal with any concern. And it's gone on this period without the complaints. If environmental health are saying they think it's acceptable, then I think we should all be saying it's acceptable and let the venue start getting on with what they need to do.
Thank you. Councillor Winkles, please. Absolutely.
Still do have the same concerns that I had when this first came up. With the noise volume, if this gets past the night to 11 o'clock at night, that was my concerns in the first place. And I tonight, and I'm afraid to say my views have not altered.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, please.
Stand by the position that we took first time round. New condition. And then that applicant has suffered enough in terms of the damage to the business.
So we're still not picking you up, sorry.
No.
No.
I'll get away with that. I'm not going to say.
No, that's finished.
The new condition 8 can be used to the applicant's advantage anyway. For example, having to inform local residents of events that are coming up. Well, that may well help them with ticket sales, quite frankly. So actually what's proposed here by the officers seems a logical compromise and will have my full support.
Mr. Valentine, please.
Well, I think like many other councillors have spoken, I still have the same concerns that I had at the previous meeting. I must admit, we had a letter tabled, came around by email today from the applicant. I was fairly astonished by the content of that letter. Seems to me they seem to be completely in denial that they're causing any problem, and they seem to be questioning the honesty of the people who are complaining. They say they've seen no evidence that there is a noise problem, but they clearly haven't read the report from the environmental health officers who talk about the vibration being felt in the kitchen of number 1 Whitstable Road, and that's even at the lower level. And they say it's highly significant increase in low frequency sound in the kitchen. I think that's unacceptable. I must say, before I read that letter, I felt very undecided as to whether option 1 or option 2 that the environmental health officers set out. But given the attitude of the owners, I'm sceptical that a noise management plan can be successfully implemented and adhered to. Therefore, I think we should go down the route of imposing a noise limiter. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, please.
Councillor Martin said, we actually solved this problem about 8 months ago. And it was only through an error that we've got into this position.
I think the officer's proposal is okay. I appreciate if people have moved to that, then, sorry, a few years back, then of course it was simply a residence. Although prior to that, it was a small industrial factory, which undoubtedly created a fair amount of noise. I don't think there is an overriding problem here. One would expect a certain amount of noise in a residential area. This site is immediately opposite the Rec, and there are quite a number of noisy events go on in the Rec. I personally live immediately opposite a restaurant on Faversham Creek, and just down the road from a pub on Faversham Creek, both of which fairly frequently have, which is definitely, let's call it intrusive, but not objectionable. And I think the people running this business are trying to do it properly, and I think the position ought to settle down if we approve the recommendation of the officers. So I shall support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonney, please.
The camera, so I'm not going to decapitate myself. I've read this report a number of times, and it's, I have to say, quite bewildering. I have read in detail the noise report from our officers, and I've seen the commentary from our residents. I was present at the previous meeting, and I think it's fairly unequivocal that this is to the detriment of the residents, the noise. And it's not about the top scale of the noise, but the low resonance. If you read the report, it talks about going 113 metres from the venue with direct line of sight, 7 Whitstable Road, 36, etc. All of those having an impact. They believed number 1 Whitstable Road, not far from the end where the speakers were located, was most impacted. The bass could be felt inside the garden and the kitchen with the doors and windows closed. Because I think you have to take that on board. What we are being asked tonight is to consider the impact of a private business versus someone's quiet enjoyment of their home. In the table on page 35, it talks about the frequency, and this is relatively low level noise, but it's the deep frequency, the low frequency, that has a significant impact here. Sound going in the background. Says the low frequency sound has increased by very significant levels, which is highly disturbing and penetrating. It is therefore, go down a couple of paragraphs, it is therefore highly unlikely that any event can be held in the venue that will not be audible to the outside building and will consequently impact the residents nearest it. It is a tin church. The fabric of this building is going to have a consequence. I hear what previous speakers say about the noise, for which I'm being interrupted by. But I think that is just as minor irritation compared to what the residents feel when there is a racket going on, be it whatever. This monitoring of an event would have been at a time of night when the road outside would have been quiet. So we can't put it down to HGV traffic. We can't put it down to traffic on the roads, unless, of course, the environmental officer would like to comment on that. But I think here we have to weigh up and consider, it's come back to us, and we've got to make a decision, not based on our past decisions, but based on the evidence before us and the impact, health and well-being of the neighbours. This church would have had infrequent use. It wouldn't have been run. I mean, I drove past today. There is absolutely no evidence that there's a cafe present. I think previous speaker said it was closed earlier this year. I drive past frequently. I haven't seen the cafe operations since beforehand.
Sorry, can I just interrupt for a second, Councillor Bonny? I want to bring our environmental officer in here and ask at that point before we get too far down the line for a comment.
The noise, it would have been at the time of day where the road outside would have been relatively quiet, presumably. A Sunday evening.
So can I ask you also to come forward to respond? It's nothing personal, it's just the event.
As memory serves, it was a Sunday evening when we did the direction. So as memory serves, it was a Sunday evening that the monitoring took place. I believe the road would have been fairly quiet at that time, but I mean, in no doubt that what we've measured and what we've listened to was from the event that was being held, not from another noise source. And we would have noted that if that had been in the case. And yeah, that's kind of low frequency, isn't sort of traffic noise that's transit and goes away. I mean, the office, I would put more emphasis on the officer's observations than on the measured sound levels. We would always say that the measured sound levels should be used to support the officer's observations, not the other way around. And in this case, they do.
Thank you.
Like musical chairs, isn't it? So I think that is really helpful. And I think it goes along with the observation of the vibrations, because we talk about how we could effectively monitor, control this. I think as a committee, we have to ask ourselves, are we putting in something in place that puts a significant burden on us, actually? We're looking across the council where we're going to have to be thinking very carefully as to what we can do resource-wise, including whether having officers out, monitoring sound frequently, because we have given a permission that then possibly could cause us a problem in the future and would require that service. If we don't have that service, what then happens? I think, an event, a space like this, it was run as a cafe. It clearly was open as that. It hasn't been used like that. It seems to be more of a live venue for music. And I go back to the fundamental principle, is this building appropriate for that? If it was a pub down on the creek, you would have a building mass where that sound, the deep sounds, those vibrating sounds, the ones that rattle your windows, would be somewhat absorbed from the building they're coming out of. But with a tin building, that's not the case. Is that correct? So the officer there is nodding his head to say what I'm saying is correct. And I think that goes back to this fundamental principle. Can we put appropriate control onto the noise here? I think a limiter does one end of the range, but what can we do for the bottom? And I don't know that there is a solution for that. And actually, that is the bit where you sit there and things shake and rattle is probably the most stressful to residents. So I have to say, I'm not happy with what the proposal is before us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marchington, please.
Thank you for let me speak. I come from Sheffield in Queenborough, but we've had problems ourselves. I used to be Commodore of the Queenborough Yacht Club back in 2003, and we were taken to court by complaint from a neighbour over noise, and the council came and monitored it. We were actually taken to court, and the paperwork says noise pollution. That's what's on the paper if you go to court for it. It's not. It's a definite line. There isn't this. Can you do things? The court found us guilty because on 2 occasions where we were over 37 decibels, not that much over, but one time we was nearly 60. And the court ruled that we were allowed amplified music up until moderate amplified music to 11 o'clock and none after. And that is written into our licence and is also attached to our deeds. But since then we've come to better arrangements with the neighbour. And we're very similar, where it's a part one side, Bidges is the other, and only one neighbour. But that was the outcome of what you're actually looking at. And any details around it don't really apply. It's straightforward, whether you're guilty or not of the noise. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anybody else indicating? I'm just going to bring our legal officer in. Stage.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully everyone can hear. I just wanted to clarify the precise position we find ourselves in. There's been a lot of discussion tonight. There has been public speaking. Councillors have spoken on the item. It already has planning consent. Planning consent is set out per page 42 and 43 of your agenda, and the conditions are there in bold. Page 43 was added in error by the officer.
Fucking useless.
A section 73 application to amend the conditions, and that's the matter we're looking at this evening. And that was, as was stated by the speaker, at the request of the head of planning at the time, Mr. Freeman. They could have appealed the imposition of this condition in error, but it was hoped that this could be dealt with quickly. And that's the application before you. On that item, further concerns were raised about noise. What basically elicited the further work that Environmental Health has done. And so what we're simply looking at tonight is whether or not you wish to stick with what is on page 42 and 43 of your agenda. And that would be the position if you refuse the application before you tonight, or whether you want to substitute on page 43 with the new evening, whether you want condition 8 or whether you want condition 8 per page 31. So that is really what you are being asked to look at this evening. If you want to stick with what was imposed, albeit in error, against the recommendation of this committee, then you refuse the application before you tonight. If you think it's better, then you permit the application before you tonight. Hopefully that's clear and members now understand precisely what we're looking at. Thank you.
Members, can I just confirm that you're quite clear on what we're voting on? Okay, Councillor Baldock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually thought the revised condition 8 was a sensible approach, but the speaker, the owner earlier, actually said it was worse. She said, don't impose this with an even worse condition. So on that basis, I don't want to make it worse for the applicant. So I would stick with the original condition. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson, please.
I'm sorry, I thought I was
It's for the new, so page 31, for
Okay,
clarity.
thank you.
Members, just again, for absolute clarity, we're all sure that we're talking about the condition 8 on page 31, which is a proposal for, just a recommendation for approval. Confirmed then with our environmental officer here, because one of the things the applicant said was that they have to keep submitting assessment. Is that the case, or? And yes, please.
So the idea of the noise management plan is that it would be something that they would put together using some of the hints that we've given them, the subjects that they should include, and that we could then recommend some tweaks or adjustments. I think probably most likely around finishing times and number of events and the gap between events. When I said treat them like a village hall, I didn't mean that there had to be a charitable organisation run by trustees. It was more that the nature of the building is more like a village hall than an events venue. So in a village hall, you would tend to get, I don't know, an event a month that went on till 11, something like that. And they make sure all the doors and windows are shut. People accept they're going to hear it, but they know it's not going to go on too long and it's not going to happen too often. And that's the sort of compromise that I was alluding to. They don't have to come and tell us. They don't have to agree an individual management plan and each event for everything they want to do. It would be more of an overarching thing, and hopefully that would be sensible and practical.
Thank you very much indeed for that clarity. So members, my understanding, when the applicant said it was going to make things a lot more difficult, the difficulties that have been alluded to were around the continual monitoring, having to keep for every event, contacting us and so on. And quite clearly, as we've heard, that's not the case. So I'm now got our head of planning to read out the conditioning in full for us, so we're well aware.
So condition 8 says prior to the continued use of the venue, a noise management plan shall be submitted for assessment and approval by the local planning authority. The management plan shall include, but not be limited to, the number of events per calendar year, the time period between each event, the type of event that is suitable for the venue, the termination time of any event, how sound levels will be assessed during any event, how this will be recorded, the actions taken if sound levels are found to be too high, threshold for taking action, what the threshold for taking action will be, the provision of information on the events programme, details for residents in case of complaint, how complaints will be responded to and actioned as necessary, recording of complaints, provision of records to the council on request, triggers for updates of the and triggers for the update of the management plan. And that is all in the interests of residential.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Could I but the decision is between two. Is preferable to the old.
Don't have the decision of turning the whole thing down. It's about whether we run with the, Vision 8 or whether we don't. That's tonight's decision. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one quick question. Does the Environmental Health Officer believe his
I'll do it in 2 words, but I think.
So,
Right, as I said in my report, I don't believe that the previous condition 8 would enable the premises to operate effectively at all. I don't think they could achieve that and have a sound level inside, which would be a viable event. So, and I don't think that you could do that with any kind of technical condition, really. I don't think that you could achieve a level where people can't hear it. So I think if you set that as a condition, they won't be able to effectively operate. So in terms of your question, I guess, yes, that would be better for residents.
Great.
The previous one would mean that I don't think anyone would be able to do an event in that premises and it be worth going to or having, which is why, being as we are where we are, that they've got permission, we're trying to find a way that it can work and the compromise with some mitigation can be found. Sorry, that's not a one-word answer.
Councillor Baldock.
Talking about music after 9 o'clock. Yeah, all daytime and early evening can continue at whatever noise they appear to want to go to. Condition 8 says it shall not exceed the pre-existing background noise level of blah de blah after 9 o'clock on any day at any point. Given that the licence is only until 10 o'clock most of the week, until 11 on weekends, we're not taking a great long period of time. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yeah, that's the old question.
Yes, that's the old condition.
Condition 8. Right. Very quickly, Councillor Bonney.
Looking at the 2 conditions, and in a nutshell, we, the council, will have a significant burden of monitoring this and executing this, and there'll be a significant cost to us. Can we recover that? Because the other one is a fairly, well, it's obvious about how that works and on what that does. I'd just like to pick up that about noise after 9 o'clock. You know, if you have a music venue, it's likely to operate during the day and the night. And actually, if you have an all-day festival and they're on every weekend, as a neighbour, I think I'd tear my hair out. You know, I think we've got to look reasonably at how you would execute this plan. They come up with that. There isn't any timeframes in here. Clarity on how that would actually map out in reality.
It does say that's subject to the approval of the local planning authority. So I think we do retain a significant hold on that basis, unless the head of plan is going to tell me different.
Is, you know, we go through the whole section 106 and all these agreements, sometimes they take months, sometimes they take years. In effect, where would they be operating without this? Can they operate prior to this? They'd have to implement it straight away. So the onus is on them to deliver that, is it?
Yes.
And then how often is that updated? The frequency of that?
Yeah, so in the very bottom of that paragraph, triggers for update of the management plan. So provision of records to the council on request and triggers for update of the management plan. So it'd be the council again. It's
Council would trigger that.
yeah. And I'll come to you, Councillor Beard.
So in terms of the management plan to be submitted, it's the business is already there and running. So that before any further events, they would need to submit the management plan would then have to contain all of the elements that are set out in the condition, including triggers for when that management plan would need to be reviewed. So that would be initially at the suggestion of the applicant, it might be on an annual basis or after the first 12 events, or include there for their triggers. But all of those elements then need to be approved by the local planning authority in conjunction with the environmental point that the council as a whole approved that management plan and then they can continue the use. But there's a number of matters that are set out in that condition that would need to be included, including triggers for when that management plan would need to be reviewed and updated and officers in the council.
Thank you. Councillor Beard, please.
Under the Constitution.
Okay. So members, those in favour of the officer recommendation, the new condition 8 of proposition. Those against? And abstentions, please. That's 10 for, 6 against, so that motion is carried. So the permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice and, of course, the relevant conditions. Thank you, members. Item 2.2, please, because we don't have any speakers on 2.1. Item 2.2 is land at School Lane. Its reference number is 21/504028/4. Thank you.
Good evening, members and members of the public. Thank you very much, Chair. Just as some quick updates, obviously you have the tabled updates in front of you, but we also received comments from Open Space confirming the contribution amount that is outlined in the report, and the developer did provide a response to a letter provided on behalf of the Parish Council by Railton, just confirming details of achieving a reduction in car use. So to take you to the application is a proposal for 25 residential units, 10 of which would be affordable properties. This is the application site in front of you. As you can see, the school sits to the west of Newington Primary School and is just outside of the built-up area boundaries of Newington. Here we can see the public right-of-way and the conservation area, which is to the east of the site. This is a drone shot of the application site. So at the moment you can see the temporary parking arrangement on the site, just there where my mouse is illustrating. And you can see Newington extending in the background. This is another drone shot of the application site from a different angle. So you can see the primary school in the foreground there and Baxland Grange just in the corner here where my mouse is. Sorry that it's a little bit unclear perhaps for people in the back. And then this is a further drone shot. Again, we can see Newington and School Lane extending along here, which is to the east. These are some photographs of the entrance to the site. So the road is known locally as No Name Road. And here we can see the junction with School Lane, firstly facing towards Boxted Lane and secondly facing towards Apologies School Lane there. These are some more images of the site. So we can see some of the temporary hard standing down where parking is currently taking place for the school. Some photos from looking out onto the fields on the site. These are some shots taken further away from the perspective of the public right of way, looking down towards the site. Units, so we can see the 40 car parking spaces that would be provided for the school located to the east of the site, and the 25 units extending in the middle there. Is sections of the proposed entrance plan, so it's indicating a degree of backfill for hedging and then some retention of hedging towards further western part of that northern boundary. This is the 10-year strategy plan, so the split of where the market housing would be and where the affordable properties would be located on site. And then these are some indicative the elevations of the properties proposed. As you can see, they're in a traditional style format. Further elevations provided for you there. And these are some indicative CGI images that were provided by the developer of the proposed units. Very much the recommendation is set out as per the papers.
Parish Councillor Stephen Hardy, please, to speak on this item.
As Emma's pointed out, the proposed developments at the junction of two rural lanes, one so narrow it doesn't have a name at all, outside the built-up area, not in the local plan, not even put forward for the SHLA. It's on best and most versatile land, as opposed to policy DM31. The main access is via Church Lane, which most of you know to be narrow and congested. You couldn't think of a worse place in Newington for a housing development than this one. Brief history. The landowner, a local farmer, sold land opposite the school for a small housing development a few years back. Because the roads are narrow and congested, it was apparent that space was needed for construction worker parking, and he, without permission, turned one corner of one of his fields into a hard standing. That then became the sales office, and when the houses were occupied, the school asked to use the land, which was now unusable for farming and effectively brownfield. And since then, a series of 2-year lease agreements have let the school use it. KCC policy, by the way, is that the school cannot expand because Church Lane is so narrow, hence the Section 106 provision in Sittingbourne. I got confirmation last evening from the executive head. There are 21 parking spaces on the school site. There are 42 staff. Some walk, some car share, some use public transport, but they're never all on site at the same time. Some are part-time. Dinner ladies aren't on school at the same time as the cleaners, for example. So there's usually 10 cars outside the school site. Some of those might use the church car park 300 metres away. The drop-off is important. There are blue badge holders, there are children that are taxied to school because of disability. The current site is more than adequate for this. The parent survey referred to in the documentation was all about parking and drop-off provision, didn't mention a housing development. The Section 106 in the table papers suggests the school wouldn't have use for 2 years. then they have additional responsibility for locking and unlocking each day. This is worse than the current provision. Proposal before you is a big loss for a small gain. That can be met in other ways. A simple solution, the current arrangements continue. Also, this is close to the Newington Air Quality Management Area. You've seen the UKC report that the applicant underpredicts at every location. The mitigation proposed, a one-year bus pass, only for Chalkwell, so you can go between Rainham and Sittingbourne, or a rail pass for leisure use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please oppose.
Could I now invite Christopher Simmons, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening. I live on the narrow road that this housing development is proposed to be built off. The road that is so narrow and difficult to pass and access that I'm still unsure, even after 5 years of living there, of the official name of it. Thank you for confirming this evening that it doesn't have a name. I'd like to take you through some of the key reasons this evening of why this development should not be built. It's a loss of agricultural land, wildlife and habitat. This development would occupy agricultural land which currently provides crops for food production and is sustainably farmed. It contributes to a decrease in the importation of crops and reduces carbon emissions. Any such loss of land of this type should be wholly discouraged, as it is detrimental to our environment and our climate. Skylarks nest on the ground. Slowworms live in the field, and stag beetles, a globally threatened species, can often be found crawling out from the hedgerows into the adjacent lane, running the length and of the field. Note that all three of these animals are protected under the UK's Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. The land in question is clay in type, historically used as brick earth, and as such has huge benefits to alleviate flooding, soaking up rainfall and creating habitats for rare species of wildlife and much biodiversity in its hedgerow boundaries and wildlife corridors. Runoff created by heavy rain feeds the local watercress beds and local chalk stream, giving rise to an extremely rare habitat and ecosystem. All of this would be compromised by another unnecessary development in this extremely inappropriate setting. We've discussed the inadequate road access, which is proposed on the lane where the site is proposed to be built. It is a single unnamed, unadopted road, has no passing points other than existing gateways and private drives. It is a complete imposition to even suggest that this is adequate for further vehicles and access. It is barely adequate for the small amount of traffic it serves and wholly inaccessible for anything larger than 3.5 tons. This results in multiple lorries reversing back the way they came in from Breach Lane. I also would like to highlight that the dustbin lorry cannot even navigate the full length of this lane and reverses back out. Our local infrastructure is already under immense pressure, with frustration growing amongst local residents. It's unsatisfyingly difficult to see a GP, even for a phone consultation. The loss and damage to the trees and hedgerows on the unnamed road is tree canopied and hedgerow lined lane. This would fit the criteria of an ancient hedgerow. It has a vast array of wildlife species and fauna and flora. It is irreplaceable. I should also note at this point that actually if you were to drive past, that it's already been cut down at the hedgerows, and so the drone images are wholly inaccurate.
Thank you. Chris Lockhead, please, to speak on this item.
Good evening, members and officers. I am Chris Lockhead, Development Director at Fernham Homes. Fernham Homes are an award-winning regional house builder based in Kent. We have an exemplar track record for creating high quality places and homes. We have specifically identified Swale as an area we wish to expand into as we recognise the unique opportunity that the borough has for high quality development. Throughout the life of this application, my project team and I have worked extremely closely with your officers, revising proposals twice during the life of the planning application to respond to comments received from stakeholders, officers and members of the public. All statutory consultees raised no objection subject to the relevant condition. This confirms that all matters have been fully considered and that the scheme is acceptable. The key aspects of this planning application can be summarised as noted in the committee report, Newington is considered by the council as a rural local service centre. The provision of a dedicated parents drop-off area and staff car park that shall deliver 40 parking spaces across both areas that will be built and transferred to the primary school at nil cost by Fernham Homes. The delivery of 25 1 to 4 bedroom bespokely designed high quality homes, contributing towards the council's housing targets where the tilted balance is engaged. Our design approach is endorsed by your officer. This will include the delivery of 10 much needed affordable homes with an identified delivery partner secured. Widening school lane to allow vehicles to safely pass each other and create a separate pedestrian verge. To ensure the use of the dedicated drop-off area, signage and road markings will be installed. A package of benefits to address air quality in excess of policy requirements, alongside typical on-site mitigation such as a travel plan, welcome pack, EV charging points and green infrastructure, £13,000 shall be set aside to subsidise sustainable travel for future residents. In addition, a dedicated on-site car club space will be provided with a further contribution of £5,000 towards the delivery of an e-bike scheme. We will procure from the local supply chain and source building materials locally to reduce our carbon footprint. We will also ensure that every home is constructed well in excess of building regulation, have one EV charging point and have selected 10 correctly orientated properties to accommodate photovoltaic panels. Extensive landscaping will deliver a significant biodiversity net gain of 69% of on-site habitat and 50% of linear hedgerows. Section 106 contributions totalling approximately £440,000 will be provided to improve local infrastructure. I respectfully request that you support your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission subject to the conditions proposed. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to speak to you this evening.
Thank you. I now invite Councillor Richard Palmer as one of the ward members to speak, please, on this item.
Wow, that sounded very good, didn't it? But how does ripping out hedgerows help maintain and enhance biodiversity? They have ripped out the hedgerows, and this shows a blatant disregard for the planning process and an absolute disregard for biodiversity. Let us turn to air quality. The NPPF at paragraph 186, planning policies and decisions should sustain and contribute compliance with relevant limits, values and national objectives for pollutants, taking into account the presence of an air quality management area, such as Newington. The issue of mitigation was made clear in the Pond Farm case in the High Court. The applicant needs to demonstrate how the mitigation measures will reduce and improve air quality. They have failed to do so. Look, as I do, I cannot see how what is suggested by the developer fits in with case law in regards to mitigation. Just to highlight, Pond Farm was an application in Newington. The Court of Appeal decision on Pond Farm highlights the importance of air quality mitigation in planning policy. The development's letter of the 5th of July makes mention of how the effects of air quality will be mitigated, just offer money and e-bikes, with no idea of take up. The mitigation proposed related to air quality is vague and unsatisfactory. Policy ST3 recognises that development opportunities within Newington are limited for a variety of reasons, including poor air quality and the surrounding high agricultural land. This was supported by the local plan panel in October 2020, further supported by the Cabinet in December 2020, and again by full council in January 21, when sites in Newington were removed from the local plan. It is clear that this site is an unsustainable location. Given the site's location, it would be outside the built-up area of Newington. The site would not be an appropriate location for residential development and would lead to urbanisation in the open countryside. This application is housing is in the worst location, outside the built-up boundary, and it will lead, as I say, to urbanisation. It will harm natural habitats and will not mitigate against harm from poor air quality. The NPPF stated aim achieving sustainable development. This application fails to meet the test. People will require a car, it will increase pressure on our local roads, and it will actually increase air pollution in an already polluted air quality management area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll bring you to the ward membering shortly, but I just need to remind members of the public that are using our online messaging system. The system is there to warn me if anybody, any member of the committee or any of our officers wish to point something out to me. It's not there for general information, comments, etc. So if it's used in that way, you will be removed from the instant messenger chat. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hall, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. I called this application into committee because it was very clear early on that residents have grave concerns. I know this location very well and it's a nightmare. I have not spoken to a single resident who thinks it's a good site for development, and I think it would be difficult to come up with a worse location. This application is clearly urbanisation for countryside and is proposed at the cost of best and most versatile agricultural land. I lived in Church Lane for years. It has a narrow railway bridge, and between the bridge and the A2, it is always heavily parked with only room for a single car at a time. In term time, the road is at standstill twice a day. That standstill goes as far as cars sat on the A2 waiting to turn into the lane, unable to do so. I have studied the census data provided and do not recognise Church Lane in the figures, which begs the question on what date and at what time it was collected. And the historic 2016 data is recognised as flawed. But it's more than just Church Lane. The road with no name isn't really a road. It's a track barely wide enough for a car, has a narrow blind summit and no proper passing places, and for weeks this summer was completely blocked by fly tipping. Boxted Lane is better, providing it hasn't rained recently. When it rains, the road floods a foot deep for about 50 yards, and KCC have no plans to fix that. It often takes days for the water to recede, and in some cases, it has to be pumped into tankers to clear the road. Wardwell Lane is avoided by most at all costs, except those who need access and strangers with sat-navs. It is narrow and winding with right-angled bends barely a car wide. Finally, there is Iwade Road, a narrow road with a steep hill that members will recall from their considerations of the Happy Pants application. It is clear to me that most drive to the school, especially those from south of the A2. There is very little walking to the school, and I have not noticed a change in that following the introduction of the 20-mile-an-hour scheme. There are rarely pedestrians or cyclists in Church Lane, as many consider it unsafe to walk or cycle up to the A2. In my experience, residents simply won't do it and use their car. At times, however, it is quiet and seems idyllic, and it's difficult to comprehend it was gridlocked a few hours ago and will be again soon. I cannot see how the local infrastructure can cope with this urbanisation of the countryside, loss of best and most versatile land, and obvious traffic impact. The impact on the community amenity is nowhere near outweighed by the benefits described here tonight. Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Recommendation, could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jays. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. Got quite a few concerns about this as listening to people and reading through it. I also have a bit of concern at the update, and it kind of gives you an indication of how much reliability we might put on some of the evidence. I mean, this place has been farmed for many years, and yet it was essential for a farmer to remove the hedgerow this year after all those years. He certainly found it necessary to allow him to get onto the field. So I have concerns about how much we can rely on some of the stuff in this report. But looking through, and one of the things that stands out to me straight away is on page 62, it's outside the built-up area of Newington. In Eastchurch, when there was one building outside the built-up area, we rejected it. This is a considerable development that will alter the pattern of Newington completely. And frankly, as one of the earlier speakers said, I would struggle to find anywhere worse to put a housing development of this size. Going through the responses, I noticed the Environment Agency have said, if you feel we should assess this planning application in more detail due to local issues, please email them. Now, there were some local issues. I don't know if we did contact them. There was a second comment. We have no further comments to make on this planning application, but I'm wondering what we sent them in the meantime. What was it we asked them to consider? Because we've heard, and from what's been said, there are a lot of concerns, and I would hope that we would have checked those concerns. Equally, with the Kent Wildlife Trust on page 70, they say it is difficult to make an informed response without viewing the ecological mitigation strategy or a detailed biodiversity net gain proposal for the site. I don't know if we provided them with that and asked them for another comment, or if we just said that box is ticked. Going through, I noticed that there's been a bit of wrangling on the housing, the affordable housing element. And I noticed, and I can't find where it is, but I remember, there's no 4-bedroom social housing. None of it. Why is it that we constantly do not get the larger units in the affordable housing allocation? We do need larger social housing allocations. We do need, so we should be getting a 10% of their 10 larger units. So I think the split should give us 4 of them. It's on page 82. The climate change officer commented, second comment, only 10 of the houses will have solar PV. No reason is given. I would like to see all of the solar, and if not possible, an explanation. Perhaps we'll find the explanation later. Rural planning. First comment, the planning statement states that this land is not of the highest agricultural value, but as far as I'm aware, no evidence has been submitted to support that statement. To be sure of a precise land grade, a detailed land classification survey and report would be needed. However, as matters stand, the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land here should be regarded as a potentially adverse effect of the scheme. And then we come back with a second comment. Thank you for your email. There does not appear to be any further documentation on your website relevant to the comments I made in my email of the 15th of October regarding agricultural land quality. So our rural officer has stated that it is potentially adverse effect of the scheme, and they didn't bother to get back and justify the claims they made. Always worried when developers do that, make claims they don't follow up and justify. Landscape and visual impact. Now, this is always, subjective, but it is admitted here that the landscape and condition of sensitivity of the landscape is moderate. Not negligible, but moderate. It is there, it is in the balance. Going to page 98, and we talk about the listed buildings. 8.92 suggests that the conservation officer considers the existing, and it's hard to read between the lines, but it considers that the existing nature of the area and the listed buildings have a positive aspect, a positive reason that would, for I assume, being in this report, have a negative impact on by this development. The officer has considered that there is less than substantial harm would derive from the proposal of erosion and urbanisation of the field. The identification of it is moderate on the scale of less than substantial. We will know that from previous appeals, that is not negligible. That is not irrelevant. It is still moderate harm and gives a, when you take the overall balance, you are entitled, or we are entitled, to weigh that in a different way. I'm getting towards the end of it. But as you can see, oh yes, the archaeology. No response has at this stage been provided by the Kent County Council Archaeology, although I hope to update members at the meeting. I don't know if I missed a tabled update, but that to me is quite important. So yes, there would be a conclusion. There would be a degree of landscape harm and impact to the setting of a listed St Mary's Church. So there are, it's a good report. It's not one I agree with, but it gives out fair balance. It gives us a good idea of the arguments on both sides. It is down to us whether or not we feel that the harm is outweighed by the benefits. I'm struggling to see that. I'm struggling to see that any promises will come through. And I think if, I'll listen to the rest of it. What I've heard so far is very worrying, but I think there is a balance here on which we need to focus when we come to our decision. But yeah, I'll listen to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, please.
The joys of me whenever anyone mentions the words affordable housing. So the reason for the hokey cokey on the affordable housing numbers is because of the delay in making a decision. Because we didn't take the decision by the due date in 2021, first homes now apply as a policy position. First homes are discounted market sale homes instead of shared ownership ones. So instead of having an intermediate product that is more widely available and more widely usable by people in the community, we get one that requires people with a bit more money in their pockets. That is government policy, I'm afraid, and that we have to suffer and have to engage with, regardless of site. With regards to why they're always 1 and 2 bed properties rather than 4 and 5 bed properties, that's actually based on our housing register. It's based on how many people on our housing register need properties of a certain size, and we need an awful lot more 1 beds than we do 4 and 5 beds. And actually, if we were delivering the 1 and 2 beds, people who are currently under occupying 4 and 5s could relocate, downsize to properties that they can afford without having to pay additional money on top of their benefits if they're on benefits, into newer homes and free up the larger properties for families. I think this is a really well-written report, and actually I congratulate the officer on giving us a very good report that we can consider wisely. I think the comments from our consultees make it very difficult to use many of our traditional methods to defend should we choose to refuse appeal. As ever, highways always useful, aren't they, with that. I will listen to the rest of the debate with eagerness, because I'm not sure which way I'm going yet. But let's see what happens.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, please. Oh, okay. This is nothing to tell your speaking, really. I'll let you come forward.
Yeah, I'm going to say something which I have to say I rarely say at these meetings, and that is, here we have something which is clearly far from an ideal planning proposal. However, it has been covered by our officers in an extremely detailed, thorough, and to my mind, persuasive report. And while there may be things about it each of us doesn't like, I think it is absolutely clear from the officer's report that the balance is in favour of approving this. It does give us, yes, there are highway issues. I know that area well and can sympathise with those issues very definitely. Yes, it is farmland, but we currently have about 1,000 houses in Faversham already built on grade 1 farmland. We're talking here about 20, not 1,000, and we have a further proposal in Faversham for 2,500 more to be built on farmland. It does happen, and we would find it very difficult to prevent. And so my inclination, I have to say, is to go with a very thorough and balanced officer report and say we should support this because it gives us 20 additional houses. Maybe that takes us to 4.9 years of basis. And secondly, because despite the comments made, I have not heard a single objection which would carry any significant weight if we rejected this and it was appealed. Thank you.
Just to let you know, Councillor Henderson, we're talking about 25 houses, not 20.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to pick up on the school parking. The parish council, when they spoke, said that it is important. And it's obviously, from what has been said about the amount of parking that school has got, it is much needed to have this parking that's there at the moment. If we're told that the landowner does this on a 2-year lease for the school, and I assume that the landowner will be able to stop that at any time. So there is always going to be a risk if the school don't get that land, that could stop, and there will be problems on the roads around there when school traffic does come in, and for the parents of the school. So I think that is a big positive. I think it is recognised how important it is, and if this is a way that we can get that secured for the school and helping residents in that area with the traffic on those roads, that is going to be a good thing. There's been talk about hedgerows, and actually I had a resident contact me about hedgerows. They sent me some photos. I don't know if officers have been out to check what has been done, but from my understanding, the hedgerows that have been taken out are the hedgerows that we can see in the photo up there, along that side where the northern edge of the site is, and those running alongside the road as it goes running down. Which, do you want to clarify that? Yeah.
I hope everyone can hear me. I'll try and articulate. So we are aware that a portion of hedgerow has been removed. As per the table update, that we were informed by landscape plans. A portion of hedgerow is due to go back although slightly set back in that location, and we have a landscape condition that would ensure that we get of species in that hedgerow. This evening, we could then take members' advice on whether they'd like to go forward with a hedgerow replacement notice. So it will depend on members' issue to resolve the removal of that portion.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so my understanding then is that the hedgerow that has been removed, which will be bordering the site, is going to be replanted. And there is probably a bigger amount of hedgerow to the north of the site, which is outside of the area, the development site, which the farmer has also removed. So this is something that the farmer has obviously done, nothing to do with this development. It's something that they do, and it seems to be they do in other areas. It's just unfortunate, I would say, that it's come at this time. The quality has been mentioned, and we've had this before at committee. There's a damage calculation that's been done, and we've had to accept that before. We don't like it. We can't see how you can just put a sum of money to do with damage to air quality, but that is where we are with the policies that we've got. Highways I won't go into, because we always know where we get with highways. Even if we don't agree with them, we can't not agree with them. The conservation harm has been, and I agree with a lot of this. We should be saying that it shouldn't be allowed. We're outside of the local plan, has been said. It was said it's unsustainable location. I don't think we can be saying that when we're saying it's also a rural service centre, and it's outside the built-up area boundary. But all of this harm has to be balanced with the need for housing, and we haven't got a 5-year supply. We're now not looking at taking forward the local plan review, and we're going to have to start allowing some housing that's outside of the local plan. And it's going to be sites like this that are on the edge of the built-up boundary that we're going to have to start approving. And if we don't, it will be approved at appeal. We may not like them, but we're in a position where we're not strong enough to be able to stop these developments. So I think, as has been said, the officer has put forward a really good report. There's obviously a lot of work that has been done by the officers, and the balance they have come up with is that, yeah, there is some harm, but the need for housing trumps that, and it needs to be going ahead. The first homes that has been mentioned, I actually think that's a good thing. It's probably not going to be surprising. And it is also good to see 2-bedroom houses being put up. We don't see many of them. And I just think if there's working people that want to get onto the property ladder, this is exactly the sort of thing that needs to be built. One of the things we have looked at with the local plan, and we've been saying, is we want houses of high quality design. And I have seen other developments from this developer, and they are of good design. We're getting something that's good. It's an SME developer. Again, we have said in our local plan that we want to get. So apart from it being outside of the location, this is exactly the sort of thing that we want. It's not hundreds of houses across there. We're talking about 25. And it's going to be villages like this that we need that housing if there is people trying to get onto the property ladder, taking these. So there is a negative impact that's on there, but we're in a position that we can't be refusing these developments. I don't feel we're in a strong enough position, and I agree with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. I just want to return to Councillor Bollock. Let's go off to if she. I don't know if you were making notes. Councillor Bollock, just give him a reply to his.
Like on round to the front.
Okay.
Right, I hope I've made all the notes, but do let me know if you've got any further questions. So if I just start with KCC Archaeology, we have gone to them several times and emailed requesting a response, and unfortunately we've not received that. I understand that there is from the local people that there is archaeological interest in that area, and so I've imposed a condition in order to have initial works done to explore whether there is archaeology in that location. It's not within an area of archaeological potential itself, a designated one, but given the degree of local interest and other schemes which have had finds come to fruition, we've decided to put that condition in, given the unfortunate lack of response from Kent County Council in that regard. Then if I, sorry, one moment. In terms of the heritage impacts, indeed, we do think it lies on the less substantive harm, and therefore we have to make a balanced view of public benefits versus the harm. And indeed, members do have to look at the tilted balance and weigh up, it is for members to weigh up those considerations, whether they outweigh the harm that's identified. The harm is to the spire of the church that protrudes. But in our view, I think that if you were traversing along the public right of way, there would be a degree of field left that you would still sense that ruralism in the field. 25 units wouldn't necessarily totally disrupt that setting, but that is the balanced judgment that was reached. In terms of the affordable housing, there is going to be an on-site provision with a 50-50 split that was agreed with our affordable housing officer and is progressing through Section 106. In terms of the solar panels, there's 10 houses which have been identified for the solar panels, and they're positioned in a way that they would have benefits from the trajectory of the sun. I can't answer on behalf of the developer sort of exactly why those 10 were selected, but that's my understanding.
The question was the
Sorry.
reason.
I mean, they've provided the solar panels as a package of benefits. There's also conditions on the proposed recommendation to secure energy efficient materials in terms of the construction of those properties. So I suppose it's about looking at the tantamount package that they're providing and looking at how those homes are going to impact it as a result of their impact of climate, if that makes sense. But I can't answer why.
Have they moved away from gas? Yeah.
They were looking, I think, at providing low NOx heaters, but I can't remember off the top of my head. There was a condition in the report relating to. Sorry, I don't have the.
So let us know if we can find it.
Yeah, I'll move on. Then I think there was questions around so was it about the ecology, Councillor Baldock, in terms of, yes, there's a package of biodiversity net gain that will be provided across the site. At the moment, the area is considered to hold a somewhat low biodiversity value because obviously the land is used for farming practices and at the moment a temporary car park. So that doesn't provide a wide species rich habitat for animals. So there is a package, a condition on the application for a landscape ecological management plan. The landscape master plan has indicated high binoculars for reptiles that will be introduced. There'll be some grassland and wildflower meadow, and obviously there'll be significantly more tree planting across the site for both screening and ecological purposes. So there is a package there of benefits that will see a biodiversity net gain produced from the site. Was there any other questions on that? Yes, so in terms of the rural lane, the hedgerow will be reinforced as part of the landscaping. And again, we've got a landscape condition imposed so we can check that we're getting good standard trees and native species on site. And that will be reinforced. That hedgerow will be set back, but again, we'll be able to make sure that it's a good quality hedge that goes in place in terms of the species richness of the proposal. It'll also be reinforced with a post and rail fence in an attempt to sort of address the rural characteristics of that road. So those are the packages.
The policy of the rural road.
So the policy seeks to retain the characteristics of a rural road, which is obviously in part to do with its tranquility. From looking at the KCC highways data, the majority of the traffic would head off towards Newington and High Street. And we've carefully looked on the balance, and these are things that members will have to have mind to in reaching their decision. On the balance, the reinforcement of those hedgerows and indeed the use of good quality enclosure details should retain a degree of the characteristics of that road. But members do have to weigh the pros of the application in terms of the provision of a school car park and increases in biodiversity net gain against some of the harms that have been identified in the report, and that's for members to consider. I have just been asked just to also draw members' attention to the first paragraphs of the tabled update in terms of reaching a decision on the proposal this evening. We have had a notification of potential appeal, so it is for members to make this consideration this evening.
Is
that everything?
Right.
If I could. In terms of the question about the no NOx boilers, there isn't a specific condition that requires them, and they could be provided as part of requirements under condition 37, which is the general.
The Bonnie then, please.
Yeah, really simple. But what is this? Is it outline or is it detail? Full detail. Doesn't say. Where? Okay, but it doesn't, and sorry, in the description, I didn't read that. Site layout again, sorry, with the estate and the car parking. One way in and one way out.
Yes, there's one access point. The access that you see at the bottom there is to provide access into the fields for.
And the main access point is further up on the bend, just off the bend there.
Just where can you see my mouse there?
Yeah. And can I ask, why we understand the reasoning for having the car parking there, which will be more of a flat surfaced area, and the houses more towards the field and into the field?
So if you see here where my mouse is, there's going to be a dedicated pedestrian link in, so that the parents would be able to drop off their children and take them away. And so that prevents traffic, well, pedestrian traffic moving onto this road. That's why the car parking is located adjacent to the school.
Okay. And picking up what a councillor said earlier about the queues in the morning into and out of to drop off to the school, because they're saying they go all the way back, quite often back to the A2 there. Presumably where the current access point is, that's going to be, that access point is the current one with the unauthorised car park.
Be improved with.
Okay, so taking those comments on, and can we have a look at those cul-de-sacs, and are we really absolutely clear that we can get our refuse lorries to adequately turn around in those, and that's all been done, has it?
That's all been discussed with KCC Highways, and they provided the relevant documents to show the refuse access, yes.
Yes, into the site.
Into the site.
But what about the individual cul-de-sacs? Because we as Swale Borough Council are responsible for that estate layout. And I want to be absolutely certain, because we had this on Stones Farm, remember, a couple of years ago, where we couldn't once we got our consultants in, it was clear that the refuse lorries couldn't drive around the internal state without mounting the pavement and knocking a pedestrian over. And that is particularly important where we've got car parking for a school here.
So the main road stacks would not, as per the plans. As far as I'm aware, the KCC Highways officer is satisfied with the refuse movement. Standing as we can from being placed on that transition into a more rural, highlighting the pedestrian movement over that of vehicles.
And the SUDs, I take that, that's at the top there, is it?
These two.
And who's going to be responsible for those? Is that the estate? Is it going to be the housing, the social housing provider? Is it, who's it going to be?
Well, I mean, you can apply, you can apply to have those adopted by Southern Water should they wish, but if not, it would likely be the management company that would be set up. So the Central Road is being adopted.
And so the rural lane that regularly floods, where's that in relation to where the SUDs are?
So I believe, and just
the other side, right?
On this plan. Here, so you can see the cemetery.
So where does that SUDs lead to? Because I know the lower Medway Drainage Board have not commented.
They don't always flooding water, and they were satisfied with the SUDs ponds and obviously the hard standing which they provided to infiltration. And Southern Water were satisfied with the foul drainage which would go onto an existing sewer along School Lane. So they were satisfied with the arrangements in place.
But what goes into the SUD system will eventually end up into the Southern Water system. Is that what we're saying?
The foul water drainage going to the Southern Water to aid in stopping surface water runoff. I'm not an expert.
I think we need to be.
Correct. I wouldn't say it's intended.
I actually wasn't planning on being here tonight, but I am, so I'm afraid you have to put up with it. So to come back to my commentary, I am concerned about the impact on the rural lane network there. I think, although this is a relatively small site, that is an extremely narrow lane. And the reason I asked for an explanation of the site and the layout, as well as listening to Councillor Horton talk about how the traffic comes to the school in the mornings. If we're adding 25 houses and we're talking about the lane that goes up to the A2 being at a standstill, then by definition, the only other way for traffic at peak period, which school drop-off points and collection are going to be forced onto the very narrowest lanes and traffic. And I think whilst KCC Highways will say that's not a problem, we do have a rural lane policy. And I do think that means that very narrow lanes will be eroded. And by definition, that will have an impact on their character.
Thank you. Valentine?
Very brief. I just want to refer to condition 37 on page, bottom of page 120 that has already been the subject of some discussion. I don't understand why this isn't our standard condition requiring 50% better than the 2013 building regs. It's only 19% better than the current building regs. We seem to have reverted back to an old condition here. We wouldn't need the one on NOx boilers because they shouldn't really be putting gas boilers into houses that would meet that energy efficiency. We have guidance published to meet it on our website. I don't understand why we're not applying it.
Some alterations to conditions, so we could discuss with the developer.
Very quickly then, councillor Boulder.
Yeah, I just. That end of the borough, it was working in Medway Town. Very idea that people are going to come out of that estate, turn right, go past the school and go all the way up. Then try and turn right at it, because it's the top of it is on a little slope.
I want to hear about your driving skills.
Those reasons, I think KCC's highways and their desktop analysis and their predictions and where they think people will go is an absolute nonsense. People living
Thank you.
no name lane and
It's nothing different to every planning meeting we come to with KCC highways, unfortunately, and there are statutory consultees, and we all know, we all know we suffer from them. Right, I'm going to go to vote shortly. I've got councillor Hunt, quickly, and then councillor Jays, please.
Just quickly, because this keeps coming up, this 50% reduction. We've got a part 5 on here, where it's an appeal decision where the inspector also considered that 50% reduction in dwelling emission rates as sought by the council as one of the proposed conditions was not part of the development plan and not justified. And they did not impose this on that appeal. I think we need to start getting a bit clearer on what we can and can't do. And it does seem to be when we've got appeal decisions that the 50% reduction we cannot be doing. I do think it's right, though, that especially if the developer has agreed to the NOx boilers, then we do make sure that is a condition. And I'm happy to propose that we do include that when we take it forward. Thank you.
Councillor Jays.
Benefits do not outweigh the harm. We lost members, yes, there's no residents have supported this.
Consider degree of landscape harm and impact on settlement. Thanks.
Thank you. So members, I'll take this one to the Councillor Baldock's question.
Site as BMV in the report because of the information that's there based on 1976 soil surveys. We made a conclusion based on the size of the holding and the loss of the agricultural land that the holding would remain viable in terms of its production, and therefore on the balance it was acceptable in terms of its loss. So that was the balance that was struck.
I can just add as well in terms of BMV. Belt of BMV land that runs through. On the periphery are more sustainable settlements where development can take place. And sustainable location for development. So,
yeah, good agricultural land with population.
Okay, so members, now take this one to the vote then, please. Yeah, Councillor Valentine, of course, you need to abstain. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so those in favour of the officer recommendation to grant subject to the conditions? Okay, those against? And abstentions? So the substantive motion is lost. So now we'll need a new motion from the floor, please.
We would reject it on the ground of the heritage impact.
Can you announce? Yes, please, be really helpful. Thank you.
These are only starters for 10. Oh, look.
Also, I think on the call, if you want to hear from anyone on this one first. Teach aspect, please. Not on the call after all. Okay, right. So.
Sorry, Chair. Are you asking for me to speak? I'm struggling to hear some of the conversation. It's cutting in and out all the time.
Well, what I'm asking for is your opinion on the impacts from your perspective, please.
Okay, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I did identify in my advice to the case officer there would be a heritage impact. As stated in the report, it would be a less than substantial harm level, and it's quite specifically related to the setting of the parish church, and that's in relation to views of the parish church from the footpath network from a distance. In that the proposed development will to some degree suburbanise the immediate kind of foreground, if you like, foreground views of the church from the public right of way that runs off the A2 west of the site and is at a higher level. So you're kind of looking down towards the church from the sort of southwest side. Obviously, the church with its spire is visible from a lot of different perspectives, given it's a landmark structure. So it's only one sort of view, if you like, that's going to be affected really. The development itself would be fairly well screened as you view it from a sort of lower level within the village itself, and it wouldn't be sort of indivisible with the church when you look at the site from standing outside the church because of sort of vegetation and intervening development. But it's those kind of wider views, if you like, from the footpath network where there will be some impact. So I say it's kind of fairly low level harm, and I think it may be difficult to sustain a heritage reason for refusal based on that relatively low level of harm, given it is quite specific and limited, say, just to the church itself. I think obviously the church is the centre of the Newington Church Conservation Area, but like I said, it's really only the church that's kind of really impacted by the proposal, given the sort of the church's spire and the indivisibility between that and the public right of way that I've identified. So yes, there is some harm, but it's quite low level, and I think a heritage reason for refusal might be difficult.
Bearing in mind this is a on balance decision, I don't think we should overlook the negative impact, even if it's only minor. My second reason would be that the proposed development would represent unjustified and unnecessary residential development within the countryside and outside the defined built-up area boundary in a manner harmful to the character, appearance and intrinsic community value of the countryside.
Did we get that? Or?
It's on page 195. I think there's also DM26, unacceptable impact on a rural lane. That one's quite clear, quite obvious. I think there's also the argument that it would have a negative impact on the landscape, but I can't find what page that was on. One 13, isn't it? Proposed development would result in a loss of language. The proposed development would result in the loss of a small section of agricultural land and the development of greenfield land. That's about the see a degree of landscape harm. Yeah, degree of landscape harm and impact of setting of listed St Mary's Church. So that's my start for 5. Chair.
Right.
Chairman,
6 for, 7 against and 3 abstentions. Right, so we've heard that. Sorry, Councillor Martin.
yeah, it's because I'm sure the officers will want to do it in a minute anyway, that the more reasons for refusal we put in, the increased chance of having costs awarded against us should appeal be found against us. So please try and stick to 1 or 2 really good reasons that you think we can defend, frankly, cannot afford.
Okay, so we've got that proposal from Councillor Baldock. Have we got a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'll put that one to the vote then. Those in favour? Oh, sorry.
I thought we would get, offers on the
Likelihood of,
the suggested proposals and occasion of the wording, not mentioning the wording, and, are ones that we should be.
okay, right, so at this point then, what I'm going to say before we do the vote, we're going to have a 10-minute recess to give us a chance to do that and for a comfort break for, yes.
Not forget the pitch vote.
A 10-minute recess. return of one member.
Yeah, of course. I'll. We got suggestion, the mock-up of the refusal that we would advise. Borough Local Plan 2017 and to the advice of paragraphs 8. Equal limit. So I will just repeat that. The first reason for refusal would be written, the proposed development would represent unjustified and unnecessary residential development within the countryside and outside of the defined built-up area boundary in a manner which is significantly and demonstrably harmful to the character, appearance and intrinsic amenity value of the countryside. The proposal is therefore contrary to policies ST1, ST3, ST5, CP4, DM14, DM24 and DM25 of Bearing Fruits 2031, the Swale Borough Local Plan 2017, and the advice of the National Planning Policy Framework paragraphs to be confirmed. And the second reason for refusal, which would likely drop away in the event of a successful appeal, would be in the absence of a completed Section 106 agreement to secure relevant contributions, the development fails to mitigate the impacts of the additional residential units on local services and infrastructure, and fails to mitigate ecological impacts on the Swale and Medway Estuary special protection areas and Ramsar sites, contrary to policies CP6, CP7 and DM28 of Bearing Fruits, the Swale Borough Local Plan 2017, such contributions being required towards the following infrastructure to be confirmed, which we will input on members' behalves based on the contributions that have been put forward so far.
Councillor Baldock.
I'm looking at DM26.
I believe that's, is it DM25? DM26, apologies, I'll put that, I'll correct that from DM25 to DM26.
Right, so we've heard the proposal duly seconded. Those in favour? That proposal has been passed, so permission is refused, subject to the issue of the granting the notice. And we now move on to item 3.1, please. Okay, go on, sorry. Stand.
Evening, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear, William, thank you.
Thank you. This is a planning application.
Sorry, we're not quite there yet. Just for clarity clear. Okay, right, thank you. We're now taking item 3.1, which is the Gatehouse, Lees Court Road, Shelwich, reference 22/503662/Full.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a planning application for the demolition of rear extension, erection of single-story extensions to north and west elevation at the Gatehouse, Lees Court Road, Shelwich. The Gatehouse is one of a pair of gatehouses within the countryside, outside the settlement boundary, within the Shelwich Conservation Area and the Kent Downs area of outstanding natural beauty. This slide shows the sites in red with the two gatehouses opposite each other at the entrance to the estate. So this is the image of the front elevation, attractive cottage with flint and stone coins under slate roof. Rear photograph. It shows the existing block plan. Existing elevations, existing ground floor plans and the existing basement. Proposed block plan showing the existing building to the right-hand side of the image and the proposed extension wrapping around the existing gatehouse building to the left of the image. Proposed elevations showing the extension to the right-hand side of the image, and the extension to the top image to the left-hand side, showing the extent of the proposed extension. Proposed ground floor plans and the existing basement. So the existing is to the right-hand side as marked, and the proposed is to the, again, to the left-hand side, wrapping around the existing building. So I'll just leave the image of the building. Sorry, Mum. Sorry, Chair, I'm having trouble with my system. Just bear with me. Thank you. So this property is a modest and attractive single-story double frontage former lodge house, one of a pair. It's accessed by a single track skirting around the village green from Lees Court Road. There are several listed buildings in close proximity to the site. The building has been extended previously, and if I can draw your attention to paragraph 3, which provides a summary of information showing approved schemes. Approved scheme in 2015, which was not built. A further application in 2020, which was withdrawn, and an approved scheme later in 2020, which again was not built, and the current proposals. And you can see the various increases in floor space of those schemes. The approved scheme in 2020 is still in time, so that represents the fallback position for the property in terms of that. Those works which were approved can be implemented. Officers consider that the building is a non-designated heritage asset of some value within the conservation area, and indeed it is likely to be included in the local heritage list, which has been recently recommended by Cabinet for adoption. Essentially, officers feel that the proposed extensions are excessive and would overwhelm and subsume the modest cottage, therefore impacting upon its existing character and appearance within the conservation area, to the detriment of its special character and its high standard of design. The application would also impact upon the AONB in terms of its character. The application is therefore before you, Chair, with recommendation for refusal as set out in paragraph 11. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Mr. James Wilson, please, to speak on this item?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Perfect. Good evening. I would like firstly to thank you, Chair, and you councillors for giving me the opportunity to discuss the proposed plans for our cottage and to demonstrate to you how vital it is that we extend our accommodation to give the 6 members of my family significant space to grow up in and allow them to remain in a village that we've fallen in love with and that we play such an integral role in community life. We are a family of 6, as my wife Becky and I have 4 children, 9, 6 and 2 one-year-old twins who were unexpected but an amazing addition to our family last year. We have dreamt about living in Shelbridge for years, where our children go to the local Shelbridge school. Since the unexpected arrival of our twins, we have revisited our original plans for the house to ensure our home can accommodate not only 4 small children, but it should also have the capacity for them to grow into teenagers, as we consider the house to be our forever home as a family. We are currently living in a 2-bed cottage with my 2 eldest children sharing a room below ground with no windows, as this was originally designed as a den, but had to quickly be modified to a 3rd bedroom so our twins could be closer to us during the night. We are huge animal lovers and need space for our 2 dogs. This is not a sustainable situation. The cottage is not safe for us or healthy for us to live in just 2 bedrooms. I worry about the impact on the current situation on my children's mental and physical health if we carry on living this way. This is why we have submitted plans for an extension to look after our growing family. Although throughout the design process, we've been mindful to the original dwelling and design space that was not overwhelming of the size of the plot. We wanted to create a house that would blend into the countryside, so that is why it's all on one level and not obstructing the views within the village. The extension includes 2 more bedrooms, which will give our children more space, which is fundamental to their growth and for their mental health, plus a larger communal area for us all to join as a family. My wife and I both come from large families, as we have many happy memories of our childhood and want to recreate the same lifestyle. We play a prominent part in the village life, as I coach the local kids cricket team and I'm on the cricket committee. We help all village events and love the spirit of Shelbridge and everything that it desires. During lockdown, we looked after the elderly neighbours with food drops, and our children have benefited hugely from local friendships. We have been overwhelmed by the massive support from the village and the local parish council, who all support our vision for our family and can see how the extension will enhance the way of living and allow us to remain in the village that is so dear to us. Should we not be able to secure the plans for the extension, we would be left with no other choice but consider moving to a new location to accommodate us, which would have unbearable consequences, as it would mean us uprooting my family, changing their schools and their way of life. We ask you to reconsider the application and see the huge positive impact the extension will have on my family and allow us to remain in the community that we are so proud of and allow us to continue living our dream and our family home in Shelbridge. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We've now got Councillor Gold as a ward member, do you want to speak on this one?
Yes, please, Chair. I was asked to consider whether to accept the refusal that was proposed. My feeling about this proposal is that I'm not sure that there is such a huge impact on the NOB and the conservation area. I think if certainly from the road which is some distance from the property, I think the impact on the areas is not going to be great. I think and I was struck by the fact that there was significant support both from the parish council and other residents, so that I don't think there would be obvious complaints about the proposal, and I think it is a judgment call as to the impact, and I felt that it was therefore really worth bringing to the committee so that that could be judged more widely. And that was my main reasons for suggesting that the committee should be looking at this. Thank you.
Members, just before I move the recommendation, we're at 10 to 10. I just wonder if I can have your indulgence, just in case we should need it, to extend standing orders, please. Thank you, members. Right, so I'll move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? I'll second. Thank you, Councillor Jays. And Councillor Valentine, just in your award, did you? Oh, not a ward member.
Yes, I'm the other ward councillor. My inclination is to support the officer's recommendation. It's an attractive building in a very sensitive location. The extension is very large, increasing the floor area by 110%. They already have permission for an extension that would extend the house by 77%. And the other point I would make is that there are a lot of large houses in the area, and there are other few smaller, especially 2-bedroom properties. So I think, extending this into another very large house rather loses some of the housing mix that's available in the area.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
And I'll just think just quickly that it's difficult when there's personal circumstances involved. But I think the officers had, of course. Yeah, but exactly. So we can't be considering that. And I think the officers have come up with the right recommendation for us. When we look at the history of the property, there's been a lot of talk about extensions over the years, extensions that haven't been built. And I think from reading through there, I would say to the applicant, it seems like it's not that there's nothing possible to be done. I think with the discussion with officers, something will be able to come up that would suit the needs of the applicant and be suitable to planning. So I think this isn't the right one, but maybe hopefully something can be looked at in the future that would be acceptable.
Thank you. Okay, members, I don't see anybody else indicating. No, it was a bit slow, to be honest. Forward, Councillor Marchington.
If the identical house across the other side of the road has been extended as well. This has been one of a pair of these houses. So it's just a case of, if you're looking at one, it's going to be added. If it's likely the other one going to remain small, or it's been enlarged as well. It's just a question. Thank you.
David.
Thank you, Chairman. I always find it hard when a parish council supports something and you get such strong support from local residents. So when I came to this meeting, I was kind of thinking it seems fair enough. But then when you read it and they've already got permission for an extension. I think the other ward member made a very good point. We do need to maintain these smaller properties in the countryside. There are many families who would need that property, and it is harsh, but you know, they bring personal circumstances into it. Sometimes you've got to find a place that suits your family. You don't try and keep changing properties to suit, you know, to suit the family. So I really hate going against the parish council and local people like this, but I just don't think, I think it's good that it's come to this committee, but we can actually look at it and talk about it. And it has actually changed how I feel about it. So yeah, thank you.
I would say me too. Photographic evidence that we've got, Councillor Marchington, it seems that this one has already been extended. I'll take them again. It's the one that suggests it looks a lot smaller already. Which, so I can't guarantee that's the case. Councillor Hall. Sorry?
What was extended? Was that an extra?
On a block plan, Councillor Hall, so it's, you can't really tell what it's.
There's a.
Members, take a look at paragraph 9. Does say that the extension balance the composition provided by the two historically mentioned lodge houses. So if the neighbouring lodge house has been
Ah, yes, and from the Google view, it looks like it hasn't either, so. But of course, with the Google views, you never know, a lot of these are about 23 years out of date. As Councillor Beer would testify, I'm sure. The Google images. Right, okay, so those in favour of the officer recommendation for refusal? Those against? Abstentions? One. Permission is refused, subject to the issue of decision notice. We now move on to item 3.3, which is land adjacent to Westfield Cottages, Breach Lane, Laurelstow. It's item number 22/502-340
Yeah, just before you do, I'll just let you know that I have one item left, but my colleague Andy Byrne is going to be doing that one, the one at Tongue Mill. I do have COVID, and I'm I'm really struggling now. So my colleague Andy will pick up the last item 2.1. Okay.
Thank you, William, and we appreciate you being here this evening, and particularly in those circumstances.
Cheers. Thanks all. Night all. Cheers.
There's no update to give members, so I'll just give a brief presentation on the proposals. So the application site is this area here. My mouse will work. No, it doesn't want to. Here we go. This area here, it's roughly rectangular shaped. It's on the west side of Breach Lane to the south of the built confines of Lower Howstow. It's in the open countryside. This is the site here. You'll see it's got, well, it's essentially been cleared quite recently. There was vegetation on the site for a number of years, but that's been cleared. It's got an open frontage. Obviously, the land now is pretty much open. There is a small building that you can see in the background there, single-storey building. And there are the remnants of a hard standing on part of the site. That's essentially fairly loose, compacted stone. But that in itself, as you can see from the pictures, has in some ways just integrated into the wider parcel of land. You've got a group of dwellings on the east side of Breach Lane here. But otherwise, the site and surrounding area is predominantly open countryside, which you can again see here. If I just zoom in on plan. So the application it's an outline application for a single dwelling. The only matter being considered at this stage, other than the principal, is the means of access. A means of access will be onto Breach Lane. As members can see here, this is an illustrative plan, but this shows how the site could be developed, and that is indicating that a dwelling would be sited roughly in, losing my mouse, roughly in this location here, with a garage stroke carport on the site as well. Again, only indicative, but the elevation drawing illustrates that a two-storey dwelling could potentially be accommodated on the site. And then this is an aerial photo that just gives members an understanding of where the site lies in relation to Lower Howstow. Again, if I can get my mouse to work, here we go. The site is here, and it's about 170 metres from the built confines of Lower Howstow. Whilst officers acknowledge that we currently can't demonstrate a 5-year housing supply, and also that the proposal is being put forward as a self-build development, the location of the site is beyond the built confines and remote from the village and from services and facilities, taking into account the limited range of services that are on offer in Lower Howstow as a lower tier village under our settlement strategy. And in addition, the site forms part of a more open and rural landscape on the west side of Breach Lane in that location, and the construction of a dwelling on the site would be harmful to the contribution it makes to the character and appearance of the countryside and wider landscape character. Importantly, I would also draw members' attention to the fact that the site has been subject to an appeal in the past. There have been 2 refusals of planning permission for residential development on this site and a parcel of land to the south as well. It was part of a wider site, which included this parcel of land here. The 2 applications were for 9 and 10 dwellings respectively. The 10 dwelling scheme was appealed, and the appeal was dismissed by the inspector on the grounds that the site was remote from the village didn't have many facilities, and that it was harmful to countryside character and the landscape. Whilst we are now obviously only looking at 1 dwelling as opposed to 10, our view is that that harm still remains, and when that is considered against the benefits of the scheme, of course, the benefits of delivering housing are diminished by the fact that there is now only 1 house proposed as opposed to the 10 units bill scheme. So the officer recommendation is that the harm significantly and demonstrably It's the benefits of providing one house on the site, notwithstanding the 5-year supply position, and the fact that it's self-build, and our recommendation is refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I invite Nathan Trustby to speak on this one?
I've lived in a village all my life, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to raise my own family there. Many others growing up in the village would like to stay, but opportunities are limited with minimal new and suitable housing available. Lower Housetow, like many villages, needs small developments to increase housing availability organically without being subject to major developments. Our parish councillors and villagers recognise this and have developed a sensible local plan to protect our village by strategically managing housing growth. This is reflected in the local support for the application, where 81% of neighbour comments support the application. It also meets the requirements of the Parish Council's planning guidance strategy for new developments. The Parish Council's planning strategy was emailed to you by their Vice Chair in mid-August, together with the requirements met by this application, which included being a small-scale incremental development, reuses a brownfield site and therefore avoids using good agricultural land. It increases local employment opportunities and contributes to the viability of village services. As a village, we need to embrace the concept of infill with developments that are in keeping with the area and which add to the wider village community at Westfield. If there is any doubt, a visit to the site would clearly show its suitability. And I believe the site has further development potential for 2 to 3 bed houses to meet demand. There are clear benefits to the immediate area and the village as a whole by allowing this development to go ahead.
Thank you very much. Could I invite Mr. Keith Trust, please, to speak on this application?
I'm the 5th generation of my family to live in Lower Housetow. My grandfather built Westfield House in the 1930s, and I would like to replicate this on my adjoining plot, which is currently barren brownfield land. It was previously a car park for the Working Men's Club and an access road to Westfield House. I cleared the site manually as it was an overgrown wasteland that was also being used for fly tipping, and it was an eyesore when entering the village. Being self-built, I'll create a high-quality, energy-efficient property that complements the character of the surrounding area. There have been 2 planners' reports published for this application, but comparisons between them show significant variations and contradictions in the content. There are, however, inaccurate details, omissions, and unfair statements in both of them. These predominantly relate to the description of the site and the surrounding area, and access to them, the parish council views and local representations. Standing provided to you, viewing the site and access to the village facilities is the only possible way to achieve a resolution that is fair and reasonable to all parties. Therefore, I would like to request that you please undertake a site visit where you can make your own assessments regarding its condition, location, and surroundings in relation to the village. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ward Councillor, speak on this one. One of the ward councillors, I should say, Councillor Woodford.
The reason I asked for this application to be seen by the Planning Committee is that it has the support of both the Parish Council in Lower Housetow and a large number of supporting comments from the residents of the village. Out of the 21 letters received, 17 were letters of support. The Parish Council has developed its own planning policy that they judge applications against. They give the highest weight to small-scale developments and also brownfield sites. This application meets both of these criteria. You have seen from the plan history of this site that 2 previous applications were refused. These, however, were for 9 or 10 houses, and there were concerns regarding traffic implications on the area of Breach Lane. This current application is only for 1 property, so will not have the same implications. This is outside the village boundary, but there is a row of cottages opposite, and allowances for sites beyond settlement boundaries and in rural areas are permitted as windfall sites. It is also important to mention that Breach Lane, in conjunction with the rest of the village, is in the process of having the speed limit reduced from 30 to 20 miles per hour. This is something that KCC is currently working with the parish council on and should hopefully be in place relatively soon. I would like to request that members conduct a site visit to this location. This should demonstrate that Breach Lane, with street lights, pavement and reduced speed, will provide a safe pedestrian route to the village facilities for the 1 dwelling that is proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Second, please.
I'll second that.
Oh, apologies, members. I definitely wasn't informed about it. Councillor Roger Clark wanted to speak, so, but I'm told he had contacted Democratic Services, I presume. Yeah, okay. It's really helpful, members, if you contact me as well.
Reasons, it will not cause any demonstrable harm to the street scene. Brownfield site, Lower Halstead Parish is in full support and 75%